The Chicago Bears have to be at 53 players by 3 p.m. today. I wanted to talk briefly about what to expect and have some surprise thoughts this morning. Let's go ahead and get right into it. The first thing I'm hearing is that Patrick Scales is going to be heading to the injured reserve. This would mean our longtime long snapper would be out for at least the first 4 games of the season. Cameron Lyons would take his spot to start the year. Scales is by far the longest tenured Chicago Bear, but I actually like Lyons as a long-term replacement. We'll have a chance to see what he can do. Hopefully, we won't hear his name at all. A couple of players have been cut this morning: Jake Curran, Brett Rippon, and Byron Cowart. I'll talk more about that in just a minute, but the Ryan Bates injury could be worse than I initially assumed. Hearing reports he could start the season on the IR, and that would mean that Doug Kramer most likely will make the roster as our backup center. Keep an eye out for Doug Kramer to make this team. And then one interesting way the Bears could keep another player on the roster would be by only keeping 5 receivers. I've had us penciled in as keeping 6 the entire time, but especially with how good our starters are, I could see us only carrying 5. Another interesting caveat to that part of the conversation is that Velus Jones Jr. could potentially serve as our 6th receiver, even though he has moved to running back. This makes even more sense if Colin Johnson isn't healthy. And according to reports surfacing on Twitter, the Bears do plan to release Colin Johnson, but they are expected to resign him to the practice squad as long as he clears waivers. Keep an eye out on that one. But another point, I've heard people talking about us cutting Velus Jones Jr. for the last 3 years. He is making this team. Ian Wheeler to the IR all but confirmed that, but I've had Velus making this team all along. If he was cut, other teams would be interested, but Velus at running back allows us to keep one less receiver. He can serve as our backup running back or play receiver and play a ton of special teams. Ryan Poles and this coaching staff are doing whatever they can to get value out of Velus. I'm also pretty sure that DeAndre Carter is making this team, and he will be our primary punt returner, beating out Dante Pettis. Although Pettis did have a really good preseason, he could be back on the practice squad. The final spots on the roster come down to this: Greg Hardy versus Dominique Robinson at defensive end, Reddy Stewart versus Greg Stroman Jr. at cornerback, and then the aforementioned DeAndre Carter versus Dante Pettis. And then finally, whether or not the team finds a way to keep Travis Homer or Kari Blasingame, but I do think it looks like Doug Kramer is going to make the roster. The rest of the team is pretty set in stone. Jake Curran, the veteran offensive tackle, has been released this morning. I thought he had a chance to snag that final O-line spot, but it seems that's going to someone else. Byron Cowart has also been released this morning. The only way I saw him making the team was if Zach Pickens went to the injured reserve. So I'm taking this news as a positive report for Pickens' health. And then Brett Rippon has been released. Like I said, Tyson Bagent, QB2, for all those who guaranteed that Brett Rippon was going to win the job. But the team has to be down to 53 players by 3 p.m. They can only add 3 players to the injured reserve to start the season. If they wanted to add more than 3, they have to do that after cutting the roster down to 53. That means 1 or 2 players that get cut today could be re-signed before this weekend, so don't overreact if possible. There should be a flurry of moves made very soon. I'll be back to break it all down. The guys who could potentially go to the injured reserve are Jacob Martin, Ryan Bates, Larry Borum, Patrick Scales, Colin Johnson, and potentially Karan Amagaji. Stay tuned, guys. Remember to hit that like button for me, and until next time, bear down.